Hi everyone, so I'm back to share my Jingle All the Way folio construction tutorial, and in the description I will copy and paste this cutting guide so that you have it to work with while you're creating the folio along with me, or when you can do it. So we're going to get started with the chipboards that we need, because we need 5 pieces. So we need 2 pieces that measure 1 1/4 by 8 1/2. We need 1 piece that measures 3 1/2 by 8 1/2. We need 1 piece that measures 5 by 8 1/2, and the last piece measures 6 1/2 by 8 1/2. I'm going to be starting with my 2 spines first. So I'm just going to get the chipboard that I'm going to need and my spacers, and I'll talk about those in a second. So you need 2 pieces of cardstock, and I'm using the Artisan Craft that Tammy sells in the store, that measures 4 1/4 by 10 1/2. So I'll explain these numbers that I have on here underneath the measurements in a bit. So I need my spacers, and these are 1 inch wide spacers that I've just attached. But when I'm doing my spine for my wings, I need a piece of spacer that is 1 1/2 inches wide. So I just lay that on top. And I've done a little bit of prep here. And I've already got my adhesive on the back of my chipboard. And I'm actually going to switch which one I'm going to use here, just so I keep my numbers the same. Not that it's going to matter, only in my OCD mind. So I always burnish my score tape after I lay it down. And we are just going to place it, butting it up against the top spacer and butting it up along the edge of this 1 1/2 spacer that's to the side. And this is what she should end up with. I'm just going to do the other one right away, and then we'll do our folding, just because I took the adhesive off the back of the other spine piece, and knowing me, I would lay something on top of it. So these spacers come in really handy, and now Tammy has in the store some plastic ones or acrylic. I'm not really sure what they're made out of because I haven't received mine yet. They're coming, they just have to get here. So you're butting it up against the top and up against the spacer that's along the left hand side, and just laying it down like so. I'm just going to move my spacers, and then I want to do some burnishing, so I'm just turning it over. We'll go back and we'll burnish the first one. We'll see how long I'll keep my workspace tidy. So when we're making an album with these wings, we have to do a little prep on our pieces because we're wrapping them. So we want to make sure that what we're doing is, this is the chipboard, and I'm folding the chipboard back over onto the cardstock. And we're going to repeat that on the other end. So I always do my short ends first. I don't really think it matters which way you do it, but I prefer to do my short ends first. And then we're going to fold this way. And what you want to do is, when you're folding the cardstock over that chipboard. You want it as close to the edge of that chipboard as possible to fold. And we're going to do the other side. So really what I do is I push down on my chipboard and fold over. And then I burnish. So that I create these wings. So I'm going to fold it back the other way because this is for the spine. So it's going to work both ways. So we might as well get it thinking that it can do that right from the beginning. And I'm going to take my scissors, and what we want to do is, I'm hoping you're going to be able to see this, we want to cut out this rectangle, the four rectangles, the one that's in each corner of this cardstock. And what we're doing is we're cutting away the bulk, and this is something I saw Tammy just do recently, and I believe it's one of the members on the Scrapbookers of Country Craft Creations that showed her. And so all we do is we cut out a little the rectangle. And we're going to repeat and do this end. And you just want to cut on the fold line. Not over the fold line, just on the fold line. And you're going about a 1/16 of an inch away from the chipboard. And last corner. Get rid of all these pieces. And so what you want to see is you're folding this little tab over the chipboard. And you want to make sure that you're right up tight against the chipboard so there's no gap here where the fold line is. So I'm going to use some art glitter glue. And I'm going to run myself a little bead of art glitter glue when my glue is not plugged. Who knows? It's been really warm here today, so... Or maybe I left the lid off of it for a bit or the pin out of it for a bit. I'm notorious for doing that. Okay, give me a second here. We have a little problem. All right, now, there we go. Now I'll probably end up with more than what I need. So I'm taking my burnishing tool and I'm pushing the cardstock up and over that chipboard. Like so. There we go. And we're just going to you want it to be flush with the chipboard or right tight against it. And we're going to turn and we're going to do the other one, doing exactly the same thing. Bead of art glitter glue along the edge of the chipboard. Any glue on my tab. Silly me. There we go. And we're just going to let this dry a little bit before we do anything more to it. Just wipe up any glue. I'm just going to set it over here and we're going to work on the second spine piece. So we're just going to repeat everything we did for the first one. So we fold it over the top and the bottom cardstock, making sure to burnish it well. Folding over the other short end. Bit of glue. And then we want to fold one long side. And we're going to fold the other way on the other side, making sure you're using your chipboard to help you fold over the cardstock. And then we're going to repeat it going the opposite direction. And then again on this side. And then we're going to do our cutting. So we're going to cut out our 4 rectangles, and one in each of the corners. And basically what we're doing, hopefully you can see this, I'm just cutting up on the fold line, getting to about 1/16 of an inch away from my chipboard, turning, and then folding on the score line, or the score line, the fold line that we created, and making sure I can just kind of tug that little triangle out of its spot. So we're going to do this side. And I really like this slight modification to the wing spines, because there was a lot of bulk in the spine area before, and this helps to get rid of it. So I wish I could remember the name of the lady that suggested this to Tammy, but it was a great suggestion. There we go. So first we want to just sort of do a little dry fit. Yeah, that looks good to me. So we're going to put glue right along the edge of the chipboard, and then make sure we put glue on the tab itself. If we get glue on our scoreboard, wipe it up, folding it over. And turning it around. Doing the other side, so along the edge of the chipboard. So like when I say along the edge of the chipboard, I mean put your glue on the cardstock right up against the edge of that chipboard. Then using your burnishing tool and folding it over using your fingers and your burnishing tool. Do a little of that, and by now this first piece will have dried. So I'm just going to get my pin and put it back into my glue. Okay, and what we want to do is we just want to fold back our wings and check to see if we've got any overhang, and if we do, we just want to cut that out of the way. And I have just a sliver. Like it was such a sliver. Like literally, that's all it is. And this side. Again, it's just a sliver. Rotating to the other side, and that looks really good. Maybe a little here. And last one. And there was just a little bit of overhang on this one. So we'll just set this aside for a second. And then we're going to repeat. No, we're going to mitre these first and put our tape on them. So I am going to use my 3/8 tape, and we want to put our tape on our wings on the good side of the wing. So I refer to this as the good side of the spine. This is the bad side of the spine. And what I want to do is I want to run my adhesive on the good side of the spine. And I like to lay my adhesive down before I mitre my wings. Some people like to do it the other way. I just prefer to have my adhesive down first. And we're going to, and I like full coverage. And we're going to do the other wing. And I leave my score tape about probably almost 1/8 of an inch away from my fold line. Like so. This time I'm actually just going to run this down the middle. I think that's going to give me some better coverage. So there's one wing finished, except for mitering. So we're going to burnish our score tape. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take our scissors. And I'll show you on this side where there's no tape. So I'm taking my scissors and I'm butting them right up against the end of the edge of the chipboard, and then I just pivot them a little bit to give me quite a deep mitre, because I want to get all that bulk away from our spine area. So on this side I have to do it on the top. So again, I'm just butting them up against the edge of the chipboard, pivoting slightly, making sure not to cut across that fold line, because you'll see it if you do. And the other side, so I'm just not crossing the fold line. And last one. And that's what you should end up with for your spine area. So let's do the other one. So first of all, let's make sure we don't have any real heavy overhang from our tabs. There's a little bit here that I want to get rid of. And let's see this side. This one's pretty good. I don't think I have to even trim anything off of that one. Which is kind of nice. And now let's do this other side. And that one's really good as well. And there might be a little here. There we go. Just get rid of all those little bits. So again, I'm going to be working on the good side of my spine, so on the good side of the wings, taking my score tape and I'm running it about 1/8 of an inch, give or take, away from the fold line, because when you keep your score tape back that far, you don't end up with seeing any of your adhesive. I have tried to use the wet glue or the art glitter glue to do this, and I just don't like the way it looks after. I believe it's just a dirt magnet happening. So Just do this the same. And then turn. And then we want to run it right about 1/8 of an inch away from the fold line. And this is not something I measure. I basically just kind of eyeball it. And the more you use this method to make your folios and albums, the better you get at it. This is one of those things that I believe it's just practice. Okay. Put that over there. And we're going to burnish this score tape. And burnish this score tape. And now I'm going to do some mitering. And like I say, this new method just takes away all that bulk. So if you've made an album like this before, remember how much bulk we had happening here? We had like 3 or 4 layers of bulk there. And this way we have 2. 3, I guess. And there's the other spine. So we have our 2 spines ready to go. And now we are going to wrap the 3 pieces that make up the cover. So our piece that measures 3.5 by 8.5, the chipboard, we need a piece of cardstock to cover that that's going to measure 5.5 by 10.5. And I only need my 1-inch spacers. I don't need my 1.5-inch spacer anymore, so I'm going to put that away. Get my 1-inch spacer into place. And we're going to take the adhesive off the back of it, because I did the little prep ahead of time, because I don't think you really need to watch me put adhesive on the back of chipboard. And then I'm doing exactly like I did with the spine pieces. I'm butting my chipboard up against the spacer that's at the top, and I'm butting it up against the spacer that's on the left-hand side. And it will look like that when you're done. And I'm just going to put all of my chipboard, attach it to the respective piece of cardstock. So for the piece of chipboard that measured 5 inches wide by 8.5, that cardstock piece is 7 by 10.5. So again, butt it into your scoreboard, make your scoreboard work for you. Lay your spacer down, butting it right up into the corner. Remove all this backing off the back of our chipboard. And we are going to butt it up against the top spacer, butt it up against the spacer that's on the edge or the side. Give it a little rub so that it's not going to. And then our last cover piece is a piece of chipboard that measures 6.5 by 8.5. And that piece of cardstock that's going to wrap it is 8.5 by 10.5. So we're just going to do that. Spacer goes back up. Let's remove all this backing. Okay, so just repeating what we've done before, butt it up against the top spacer, butt it up against the spacer that runs along the left-hand side. And there we go. So I'm just going to put this spacer away. And then we are going to start prepping. Well, first we're going to burnish each of them. So I want to burnish them. And the next one. Doesn't matter which one you burnish first, as long as you burnish them all. And the last one. Alright, so now we're going to fold our cardstock over our chipboard, burnish the fold lines, repeat this on the other end, turn and do the two long sides, again using your chipboard to help fold over the cardstock. And the other side. So we're just going to do all our burnishing first, or folding first. Next piece, fold it over and burnish. Other short end, fold over. And I do use my fingers as tools too. Last side to fold over. Last one. And the two long sides. And you want to take your time making your cover, because that is the foundation of your book, be it an album or be it a folio. And just taking that extra little bit of time is a way to make sure that everything stays together. So I'm going to run some score tape along my outer edges of my cardstock, and this is 3/8 score tape that I'm using here. And turn, and I'm going to do the other short end. And basically all I'm doing is just running my score tape just slightly over that fold line that we created. So just past the edge of the chipboard. And we're going to turn this way. And again. Last side. And I'm just going to do assembly line. I'm going to do all my taping. So I use 3/8 of an inch score tape along the outer edges of my cardstock, and it's 1/4 of an inch that I put on my chipboard. So let's do the next piece. And like I say, you could use the art glitter glue. I just tend to always build my albums with score tape. That's just what I do. Doesn't make it right, doesn't make it wrong. just makes it what I do. And one long side. Turn, do the other long side. And last one. So I'm doing my short sides first, just running my score tape just past my fold line. And I like to put my score tape down before I cut because I just think I get edge-to-edge coverage then. Some people cut then put their score tape down. That again is your choice. And we are going to do some burnishing of our score tape. And I like to burnish before I cut. Because if I don't, there's a good chance I'm going to forget to burnish. Last one. Alright, so I'm just going to put my scoring tool up there, get my scissors. So I'm going to show you on this side, but I'm going to be cutting on the other side. We are going to cut out these squares, or these squares, just like we did the rectangles on the spine. So what we're doing is we are cutting up to just to the chipboard. So I'm talking like a 1/16, a 32nd. You just want to cut up like so. And then we're going to do the next corner. And I'm going to do all my cutting of the corners. Then I'm going to go back and do my mitering, and I'm going to do all 3 pieces assembly lines. So just do each step and then move on to the next piece. So we're just going to set those aside. Oh, forgot one. Wouldn't get too far with that, because what you're doing is you're cutting out the bulk. And I know for those of you that follow me, I probably say that every time I do a tutorial. And for those of you that are new, you are never too new to try to make an album or a folio. There we go. 2 more to go on this one. And last one. Okay, and we're down to our last piece. Just up to the corner, about a 1/16. Like you are almost to that chipboard. Try and hold this one up so you can see once I have it cut. So if you see, there's the edge of the chipboard and there's the edge of the cardstock. It is right less than a 1/16. And one more corner taken care of. 2 corners left. And one more. Okay, so now what we need to do is we need to mitre these edges. So I like to fold my cardstock over, so this tab, this 1-inch tab, I like to fold it over, and then I like to take my scissors, just like we did before, butt them up against the edge of the cardstock and pivot and mitre. And repeat on all 4 corners. And you just have to keep folding your cardstock whatever way folds it over so that you can get at the other edge, the edge you have not yet mitered. So that's what you're looking for. So we're going to do that on all of our corners. And like I say, I like to do my covers sort of an assembly line, so I don't forget anything. Last one on this one. So that's what you want to do on your other 4 pieces, is cut out the corners and then mitre them. So next one. And mitre. Fold the cardstock over the chipboard and mitre. And fold again. And make sure it's tight what you folded over, that you don't have any little bubble or little airspace, or because you want to get it all. And I believe this is the last one on this particular section. I always like to look at them and make sure that I've got my mitres in all 4 corners. Last one. And fold and mitre. And mitre again. Last corner. So I also have a Facebook group called All Things Paper by Bonnie, And I would love, when you finish your projects, if you've used one of my tutorials, to post pictures on my Facebook page, because I always love seeing what people do with my tutorials. So we're going to start with the 2 short sides, because that's what I like to start with. I'm going to remove the 1/4" score tape backing from my chipboard. I'm going to leave it in place on the sides I'm not working on the cardstock, just because that's what I like to do. Get out my glue, and I'm going to run a bead of glue along the edge of the chipboard, and the glue is going onto this cardstock. And I'm just going to change my tool, and I'm burnishing it and pushing it up against the edge of the chipboard. And that adhesive that I put there, that glue, it softens the fibers of the cardstock. And then when we're asking that cardstock to fold over onto the chipboard, it kind of stretches the fibers out, because paper is just like a material, or is a material. It has fibers in it. And again, run your bead of glue, take your burnishing tool, pull it back, and fold it over. So like I say, I always like to do my 2 short sides and then do my long sides. I just prefer the look of that. Again, you could do it the other way. And more wet adhesive. And fold. And last side. And we want a bead of glue. And burnish that glue, or that fold line. And I like to work from the center and then work my way out to both corners. And there is one of your covers. I'm just going to set that one there. We're going to move on to the next one. Again, as I say, that's why I like to do it assembly line. So I'm taking off my 1/4" backing off my score tape. Take the backing off of one piece at a time on the outer edge, the 3/8. Run the bead of glue. Burnish. So originally when I made this folio, I just made a cardstock cover for it. I didn't make a chipboard cover for it. So if there is interest, I could in the future make a tutorial showing you how to make this folio using just the cardstock. So you could leave a message in one, or comment, if you'd like to see it with just cardstock, no chipboard. And fold it up, fold it over, and there's the back. So this is the back cover of this album, And this is the piece that goes on the right hand side, and the one we're going to do now is the piece that goes on the left hand side. And we're almost getting down to assembling. I took off a piece of score tape that I wanted to wait to do, but that's okay. Won't hurt anything as long as I don't lay anything on top of it. And that's really my only reason for not taking the backing off my score tape until I'm ready to fold it over, is because I am notorious for laying another piece of paper on top of it. And fold and pull. And then we're going to do this side next because, like I say, I have it sitting here. There we go. And last side. And once I get all of my chipboard pieces covered, what I like to do is I like to go back and burnish everything. Just going to put my pin back in my glue. And then I'm just going to take my Cricut tool that I use to burnish. It's just got a wide because there's nothing I dislike more than a bubble on an album. And we'll do our wings, our spine pieces, even though we probably have already done them a couple of times. So now I'll explain the numbers that I put onto my pieces of chipboard, just to keep things straight. So I wanted to make sure that I kept the orientation of everything, and so I numbered them 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I'm just going to lay it like that for just a second. So the 3.5 by 8.5 is the piece I put the number 1 on. Then on one of my spine pieces, so the 1 1/4 by 8.5, I put a 2. 6.5 by 8.5, I put a 3. The other 1 1/4 by 8.5, I put a 4. And my last piece, which was my piece that was 5 by 8.5, I put the number 5 on it. So we are going to start by working from the left-hand side. So I'm just going to move all of this like this. So we need to turn some things over. And I always like to look at my cover pieces and I kind of decide, what do I want at the top? What do I want at the bottom? Do I have one that maybe I cut a little too close to the edge of the chipboard? And those are all things I say to myself to determine which piece, the orientation of these pieces. So I am using my scoreboard to help me keep things square. I am pushing everything up to the top, and this piece of chipboard is right over on the right-hand side, or left-hand side. Sorry about that. And I don't want to be able to see any of my score tape. That's definitely not what you want to see. And if I'm happy with everything, then I'm going to do a little flip. And I have to remove my backing. And I was happy with everything, so now we're going to start adhering things. So this is going to go like this. So I'm pushing my spine right up to the top. I am taking my 3.5 by 8.5. And what I am doing is I'm lining up this chipboard with my fold line. I don't want to go over it, but I want to be as close to that fold line as I absolutely can be. I want to make sure I'm nice and straight, and when I'm happy, I can lay things down. Okay, so that was 1 and 2. 1 and 2. It's going to end up being, some of them might end up being upside down. So this is our piece that is 6.5 by 8.5, the number 3 piece. We are now going to attach that to what we've already started here. And I'm just going to make sure that, I think I want it like that. Take off the backing off of that score tape, making sure everything is up, tight, square, and I'm laying it down, making sure I'm going to be happy, and like so. Yeah, I like the looks of this so far. And then we need our other spine piece. So I have to work from this side when I'm doing this. So I put my spine piece right up here. Going to dry fit first just in case something's off. Should be good though at this point in time. Yeah, looks good. And oops, don't touch it. So we just want to make sure that, and I tend to keep the piece that I'm holding in my right hand angled until I'm happy with my placement. I just want it to that fold line, not over it, just to the fold line. And that's why if you keep it angled, remember we left that 1/8 of an inch? There's no tape there, so we got that little bit of wiggle room. Happy with that. Happy with that. And now I have to turn it this way for my very last piece. And I just want to look at some things here to make sure I'm happy. Yes, I'm happy. Okay, and is there a corner here that I'm not happy with? So let's pull off our adhesive. And we're going to just rearrange this in the scoreboard just a little bit, because that's the problem when you're doing a folio. You sort of get too big for the scoreboard. So sometimes you just have to rearrange it so that your floppy end, or the end you're finished. That looks very good. Excellent. So I want my skinny piece to be on my left-hand side. Maybe you'd like it like that. That is your choice, but I'm going to make mine go this way because I want my skinnier piece to be on my left-hand side of my folio. So now, as I always say, it's really quite flimsy, quite flexible. I have 2 pieces that I refer to as my spine reinforcement pieces. And I cut the chipboard cardstock at 5 by 8 3/8 because I want top to bottom, side to side coverage. And we need to put some adhesive on the back of these. So I'm just going to move my little Post-it note once I can get it. Put it over there. So I got these new lights, and I'm hoping they're giving us a better picture than what I was having before. And it just... Okay, and I just need a smaller piece for the middle. And again, I want side-to-side coverage here, because this is what holds the book together. And this is what we don't want any air pockets under this reinforcement piece. So I like to have full coverage. Okay, so let's do the second piece. Hopefully my head's not getting in the picture. Make sure that's nice and flat. Where you get the adhesive, fold it over on itself. It happens. I like to do the outer edges first and then come back and do the center, especially when I'm using the score tape rolls. If I had sheets, I'd use those, but I don't have any right now. And this will be fine. Just ran out a 1/4 inch, which is okay. I have more. So we want to burnish this score tape. And we're going to remove the backing from our score tape. So what we want to do is we want to place that measured 5 by 8 3/8. We want to center it side to side, top to bottom, and we are centering it over that spine area to reinforce it. And when you're happy, just let it lay down. And that's one. And then we're going to remove the backing off of our other piece of cardstock, the other reinforcement piece for the second spine. And if you see any overhang of adhesive, like I have, I wonder if you can see that, maybe there. I'm just going to push it back onto the other adhesive. There we go, on this side too. All right, so again, all we are going to do is center left to right, top to bottom, and when we're happy, we're going to lay it down. And we are going to burnish. Put this score tape away. It's not in our way. We are going to burnish. Now I am going to use a couple of different burnishing tools to create my next, or do my next step. So the first thing I want to do is find my fold line. The edge, what I'm looking for is the edge of the chipboard, so the spine chipboard, and the piece that was laid down beside it. And I do it just a little at a time, taking my time, because there's no rush to this. Making sure that everything is folding. And then I'll take this tool. You don't want to use the point, because the point will break through the paper, and then you're going to be extremely unhappy. And I find by using several scoring tools and burnishing tools, this one's actually probably my favorite for this. I was having a problem with what seemed like my covers were not straight on this folio, and I realized what my problem was is that I was not scoring my fold lines quite enough, or where the spine and the covers met, so that the adhesive was not adhering as well as it could. And then what was happening is I was ending up with my cover moving, and I was a very unhappy scrapbooker a couple of days ago because of that. I couldn't figure out what I had started doing that was wrong. And what I believe the issue is here, it's because my spine is so narrow. I don't know if that actually is, but like I say, I was having quite the time with it, and I was very frustrated. And then I realized, maybe my problem is how I'm folding things and the tools I'm using. And that's when I pulled out this particular scoring tool, burnishing tool, and realized that it allowed me to get right down in that fold line. And I was able to fix my problem. Leave it this way for a second. And like I say, this is all about patience. And we want to fold this one. And sorry if my cover is getting in the way. So if you look here, can you see that it doesn't, we've got a little bit of a lip, and that is because we need to burnish this fold between the spine and the cover. And I didn't have this problem up until when I started making this folio. And like I say, I discovered, as I was trying to solve my problem, that my problem seemed to be not enough burnishing. Because I'll show it to you in a second. Now, can you see? I have a perfect fold. And it's all due to burnishing. So if you've been experiencing that with your covers, you might want to just reassess how much you are burnishing. And I love the fact that I don't have all the bulk here and here. I thought I was going to have a problem with seeing a little bit of the cut line, but I don't, because I love the rest of it too much. So here's what we've got. We've got our folio cover completed. We're just going to add our magnets, and I'm using two sets of the large magnets. So what I need here is I need a positive and a negative, and I need 2 sets of them. And I like to make sure that I'm really happy with what I'm looking at, and I am. So I am going to put my magnets first on the left-hand side cover, because they're going on the inside of that cover. And I'm going to decide that I'm going to use the positive side. And I like to use my thumb. I like to come down from the top of the chipboard about the width of my thumb, or to the first digit, and same here. And then I like to put down my magnet. And then I'm going to repeat it on the other side. Still keeping a clean desk, I'm shocked. Get the backing off of it. Okay, and again I'm going to go up a thumb, basically in a thumb, if I'm happy, like so. I'm going to remove them. Put on a little bit of score tape. Going to use some 3/8 because I don't have a new package of, or I don't have another package of 1/4 inch out already. And you guys don't want to listen to that crackling adhesive, not adhesive, but the plastic. Okay, and we're going to put the magnet on top of it. So what we've done is we put the negative on top of the positive magnet, and then what we're going to do is still make sure we're happy, and I believe I am. I'm going to just make sure it's nice and square, which it is. I am going to remove the backing off of the negative side of the magnet. And then I'm going to form my book again, making sure I'm going to be happy. And yes, I am going to measure. So I'm just about 2 3/4. I'm really happy with that. I like a straight book. And then what we're going to do is we are going to put some adhesive. And burnish it a little bit. And we should have something like this. Okay, well, let's move on to the inside of our folio. So in the inside of our folio, we are going to have a left side and a right side and a top. So we're going to need to cut 3 pieces of cardstock. The first one we're going to cut at 7 5/8 by 8 1/2. That's going to be for the left side. The right side is going to be 6 3/4 by 8 1/2. And the flap that we're going to have on the top is going to measure 6 1/4 by 9, less about a 1/16, just so it's not hanging over the edge or the bottom. So let's start with the left side. And on the left side, I have scored at 1/2 and 1 1/2. And I'm going to fold on those score lines. And we're going to fold on the second score line. And what you should have is you should have a flap that has a 1-inch gusset and then the 1/2 inch tab. And that particular flap is going to go here on the left hand side of the book. Whoops, turn my book around. Yep, turn my book around. On the left hand side of the base page, so that would be the page that created the back of the album, or the chipboard that created the back of the album. And what we want to do is we want to make sure that we're not going over either the top or the bottom. We don't have any overhang. And I just want to look, and I don't see any there. So I would be very happy with that. And then to make sure that we're not impeding on the fold line, you want to stand it up or fold it back on that 1 inch, we're at the 1 1/2 inch fold line, and just make sure that when you have it in the book, we're not impeding on this hinge here, or the spine on the right hand side. So I'm very happy with that. So I'm going to miter my tabs, my 1/2 inch tabs. And we're going to get some glue. And I'm going to run a bead of liquid adhesive along that 1/2 inch tab. And then what I want to do is I want to make sure, so I'm going to turn my book so that the right hand side, left hand side I should say, is down at the bottom of my scoreboard, because I want to be able to see where that fold is for my spine, where the book actually folds. So I'm just kind of making sure that don't have any overhang top or bottom. And when I push it back, I'm not going to be, just going to look again, and I'm really happy with that. The bottom too. And so I'm going to open it and I'm going to give it a good burnish. So it's going to end up looking like this. So when you have your book standing up, this is what it's going to look like. So that is the page, or the flap. It's hard to call it a page when there's no hinge. So my flap that's on my left hand side. And now I have another flap that is on the right hand side. And it measures 6 3/4 by 8 1/2, and I'm scoring at 1/2 and 1. And I'm going to fold on those score lines and burnish. And then I'm going to fold on my second score line and burnish that. And we're going to repeat the same process, only this time we're dry fitting on the right hand side of the book. And what we don't want to do is we don't want to be over our fold line for the front flap, for the flap that's on the left hand side. And I'm pretty happy with all of that. Making sure top to bottom you're not over. Yeah, I'd be very okay with that. So I'm going to miter my tabs. And then I'm going to put some wet adhesive on that tab. And I'm going to turn the book so that the right hand side is at the bottom of my scoreboard. And then I'm going to line this up, making sure I'm not going into the fold of the spine, and I'm not. Making sure that I'm going to be happy this way, that it lines up with the flap that's on the left hand side. And when I'm happy, then I'm going to burnish it, that tab. Okay, so then what we should have, this standing up nice and straight, is when we have the book closed, this is what we should have. Looks good to me. I'm going to burnish this just a little bit more. It's amazing how just a little bit of burnishing just makes everything, there we go, that's what we wanted. We wanted it nice and straight. Okay, so now the last flap is the flap that's going to go at the top of the book. And that particular flap measures 6 1/4 by 9 less a 1/16, and I scored at 1/2 on the 9-inch side. And we're going to burnish this. And I'm going to miter my tabs. Those pieces out of our way, and then we're going to open everything up, and this is going to sit between the left side and the right side. We want to make sure that we don't need to, I think we might have to just cut a sliver off of this. I'm going to say I'm going to probably cut off about 1/8 of an inch. So, and we're going to miter that tab again. And that is a much better fit. So the reason I had it at 6 1/4 is you don't know how far apart these pages are going to go. Yes, you're putting them right on the edge of the back cover, but if you're off just a little bit one way or the other, or the book didn't quite end up being as wide as what you thought it would be, you might have to make that adjustment. And I would dry fit everything before you actually adhere it down. Or you might have to do like I did in this book and have to rip out some flaps. Thank goodness for Artisan. Okay, so we don't want it hanging over the bottom. I'm going to turn it around so my head isn't going to be getting in the picture. Centering it side to side. And that's looking very good. And then we're going to just, and we're going to burnish. Open it up and burnish. And you have now put in your book your left flap, your right flap, and your top flap. And it's all closing nicely still. Okay, so on the left, and I'm going to call this left side front, we have 2 pockets, and these. So I decided I should put this little segment in where I made the angle pockets on the front of the left-hand side flap. And the reason I wanted to is I don't think I explained clearly enough how to overlap these 2 angle pockets and how I created them. So I've made myself a template, which is right here. Doesn't matter how wide this is, you've just got to imagine that this piece of paper here is this flap. So what you needed to do is you needed to score or cut 2 pieces that were 4 1/2 by 4 1/2. And on the right side angle pocket, you want to score on 1/2, and then you want to rotate it clockwise and score at 1/2. But on the left side, or the left angle pocket, you're going to score at 1/2, but then you're going to turn it counterclockwise and score at 1/2 again. So I hope that makes that part a little clearer. And then we're going to fold on our score lines. And all the L and the R were for me was to remind me of my orientation as I was trying to explain it to you. So fold on our score lines. And then I'm going to cut out my excess, so I'm cutting through where these 2 score lines intersected to cut the tabs under. And then what you're trying to do is you want to cut from this point to this point, so you're cutting corner to corner. So I'm going to get my trimmer, going to lay. Some people find it's easier if they draw a line. I find that because this particular cutter has a wire in it, I don't know if you can see it. Maybe if I lift it up, the Fiskars, this little cutter comes with a wire, or has a wire as a guide. And so I find because of that I don't need to draw myself a line. And then I'm going to cut corner to corner. and that gives me my angled pocket. And it also, when you fold over the tabs, it cuts your tabs on the back. So let's do the other one. Now with this one, because it's going to be on the left-hand side, we're cutting corner to corner. So a good way to remember it too is you cut from your tab corner to your tab corner. Okay, hope that makes sense. So I'm going to put this in the cutter, and I'm going to line this up corner to corner, and then I am, without it moving, going to cut it. So we're just going to get this out of the way. And just pretend now that this is the front of the left-hand side flap. And we want to put one of the angle pockets on the left-hand side and one on the right-hand side. So, as I showed you in the tutorial, I like to glue down my outer edges first. So I'm not gluing the bottom side, I'm gluing the left and right hand side of my angle pockets. Something like this. And then this one is going, the right side is going to go, of course, on the right side, so some adhesive on the back of this 1/2 inch tab. Like so. Now this is where I don't think I was clear enough with my instructions. You want to make sure when you're gluing these down that you have the left-hand side one down first and the right-hand side one tucked in underneath. I hope you can see that. So what I am doing when I put the glue on here, I am going to kind of take my right-hand side one and put it on top of my left-hand side one. So the tabs are laying over each other. And the reason I want to do that, because if you glue them just on top of each other without putting the right-hand side on top of the left tab, you're not going to be able to get everything tucked down into the bottom. And actually that's what I did in the first one and had to go back and fix. So you can fix it if you're using Artisan. I don't know about other cardstock, but Artisan will take a lot of punishment. So I'm just laying it inside and laying it down, and it should almost want to lay down itself, and you just got to make sure that everything, you're going to be happy. And then give it a good burnish. And this is how, I think this is a better explanation of what I did and how I did this angle fold over pocket. So I hope that's going to help. It's for the front of the left side of our folio. And in that angle pocket we are putting some mats. We are putting 2 mats that measure 5 1/4 by 7 1/4, so we have 2 of them. And they're going to go into our pocket. And then we have 2 mats that measure 4 1/4 by 6 1/4. And we have 2 more that measure 3 1/4 by 4 1/4. And they're all going in. And you just have to be careful that you're not getting hung up on. There we go. Oh. And that is the front of your flap that is on your left-hand side. So we're going to move to the left-hand side back. So we are going to have on the left-hand side back a portrait waterfall, and I've created a base page for our waterfall because we don't want to put it on this page until after we have our pattern paper down. So we are just going to make the waterfall and then just attach it with a paper clip and come back and adhere it to the book once we've decided on the pattern paper. So the base for our waterfall is 5 3/4 by 6 1/4. And then I've made 3 flaps, and they all measure 4 3/4 by 6 1/4. And on each one of these flaps, I scored it at 1/2. So we're going to burnish our score lines. And I am also going to round my corners, and Tammy just got these in the store. They are We Are Memory Keepers Crocodile Corner Chomper, and this is the 3/8 and the 1/8. I love them. And we're going to round all of these corners. And I will go back and round all of my photo mats. I might do that now so I don't forget from page 1, or from the front, left side front. And you can even do 2 mats at a time. That's about all I feel comfortable doing, because sometimes things shift. And then we'll do the 5 by 7s. All right. So let's put these mats back in the front, that front angle pocket. There we go. And then we'll work on this waterfall. So as I said before, this waterfall is going to be a portrait orientation. So it's going to end up looking something like this, give or take. So let's move that out of our way. And I am going to turn my whole scoreboard around because I just find it easier when I have everything tucked up in this corner when I'm doing waterfall. It's one way that I'm able to keep my waterfall straight. The base is the other way I'm able to keep my waterfall straight. So I do not miter the corners on my flaps on my waterfall. And we're starting at the top, or at the side in this particular case, but it's at the top right now. And because I have it in my scoreboard, I am able to keep everything nice and square. And that is the first flap. And we'll do the second flap. So I'm putting adhesive on the second flap, using the wet glue again. And this time we have to open it. And what I am doing is I want to take my waterfall and I want to butt it right up to that 1/2 inch tab of the first flap. And you want to make sure you keep everything nice and straight. You might have to turn it around and look at it and go, yes, I'm still happy. Never be scared of making a waterfall. Your base is your friend. And then we're going to put the last one. So I think I can turn my scoreboard around now. And we're going to put our last flap in or on our base. Making sure that everything looks nice and straight. I always like to lay them down, hold it up and look at it and go, yep, still happy, everything's nice and straight. And then burnish. And then burnish everything down. And I'm using a magnet to keep my waterfall closed. So because I want to put this top magnet on the outside of my page, because I'm not going to be matting the back side of this first flap, I'm going to have my paper on the top of my magnet. So I'm going to have to use some adhesive to hold my magnet down. So I'm just going to tear a little bit of score tape, put it on the back of my magnet, just ripping off the little bit of extra I had. And then I'm going to line it back up again with the one that's on the back side. And then we're just going to repeat that same process. A little bit of adhesive for the back of this magnet. And then remove the backing. And just let it adhere to the other side. Now I am going to take the paper backing off of my magnet. Once I get my little picky tool. And I am going to put some adhesive over top of it, just so it doesn't move. And the same for the one on the back side. like so. And then once we have decided on our pattern paper, we will adhere this waterfall to this inside or back of the left side. Hope I'm not confusing you guys with these lefts and rights. I'm just going to round this one side of the base just so it looks like the rest of them. So that's what we're going to have. So I'm just going to get a little paper clip and I'm just going to gently adhere it so I don't misplace it. So we've done the front and the back of this left side flap. Okay, so let's move on to the front of this right side flap. And what we're creating on the front of this is a gatefold. So we're going to have one flap that folds to the left and one that folds to the right. So we're going to set the book aside for just a second and I'll give you the measurements. So you want to cut 2 pieces of cardstock at 5 by 8.5. And I did just a sliver less than 8.5, so in the instructions it says like a 1/16. So you're going to cut 2 of those, and then you are going to score each of them at 1/2. So let's fold on those score lines. And burnish them well. And because these 2 flaps go from the top to the bottom, I want to mitre my tabs. And I'm doing that to both of them. I'm going to get the book back in here. So what you have to remember is, we have this 1/2 inch gusset. We want to make sure that when we put down the tab that is going to be on the right hand side, we only put it to the score line. We don't think that we need to put it right on the edge of this paper, because then it's not going to fold correctly. Because you want that gusset, because things are going to bulk up as you decorate and put pictures into this. So we just want to make sure that top to bottom it doesn't hang over. And I am very happy with that. So I am going to turn my book so that my right hand side is at the bottom of my scoreboard, because I just find it's easier to work this way. I'm going to get my white piece of paper so that I can see exactly where I am. And if you're new to my tutorials, I often lay down a white piece of paper because I find color on color makes it very difficult for me to see where I want to put things, and I often just lift it up after I fit the flap where I want it to be, and then I just run my glue along. So you don't want to go over that fold line. And remember, this page is just slightly shorter. The flap is slightly shorter than the right side page itself. So you just want to kind of center it top to bottom. Okay. So now I'm going to bring the book back to its proper orientation, get my little piece of paper out here, stand my page back up so I'm happy. So there's my 1/2 inch gusset, and there is my flap that is on the outside of the right side flap. And now I'm going to repeat the process on the left side once I find my flap. So that is going to be over here. And this time you can use the flap that you just put on kind of as your guide to where you want things to sit top to bottom. So I'm just going to put my white paper underneath, because like I say, I just find that that helps my eyes. And when I'm happy, making sure that I'm not overhanging the raw edge of this page, and I am just a little bit, so I need to back it up. There we go. I think I'm much happier. I'm much happier with that. So I'm just going to lift the flap up, add my adhesive, and you can use dry adhesive. I just find that using the art glitter glue kind of makes construction go faster. And if you're using artisan and you have to tear something out, you usually don't ruin your project. And take my word for it, I have done that. Believe it or not. Okay. So on these two pieces, we are actually going to do, I believe I'm going to use a ribbon closure. I have not decided on that ribbon yet. So I'm just going to put ribbon to remind myself that that is what I'm going to use as my closure on this page, on these two flaps. So one goes to the left and one goes to the right. Now we're going to get to practice some angle pockets again. Only these are going, so one of these angle pockets is going to go on the left hand side and the other one is going to go on the right hand side. Okay, so I'm just going to move the book for a second. I'll give you the measurements to these. So for the left hand angle, for both angle pockets, you're going to cut a piece of cardstock that is 3.5 by 3.5. And so for the left hand side, no, let's start with the right hand side. Then we're keeping it all straight. We want to put our angle pocket in on the right hand side, and we want to score at 1/2. And then we are going to rotate clockwise, so just think of the clock, and score again at 1/2. For the one that goes on the left hand side, we are going to score at 1/2 and then rotate it counterclockwise. And like I said before, that is why I put my L and my R's. When I do my first score, I put my right or left, and that just helps me when I'm going to score my second score line. So fold on those score lines and burnish. Do it to the second pocket. And then I'm going to cut through my X to get rid of this bulk that's down in this corner. So my pocket is going to lay flat. Remember, don't cut above the X because then you're going to end up with a hole. And then you can give it another little burnish, but I'm going to cut my other one first. So I'm just cutting. I am just cutting, hopefully you can see this, through where those two score lines meet. And then I'm going to burnish. And I'm going to burnish my second one. And then I'm going to get my cutter, like so. So for the one on the right side, remember I said we want to cut from this corner to this corner. So I am cutting like so. So I'm laying it in my trimmer. making sure I line up those 2 points with my wire that's in this cutter, and then holding it tightly. And sometimes it can be a little difficult to get, or when you move it like that, that can change things too. You don't want to do that. It'll be fine. I might take my scissors and just cut out that little. I'll be fine with that. Okay, and now for the one that's on the left hand side, so this is going to be our right hand side pocket. And now we're doing exactly the same thing. We're cutting from this score line to this score line. No, yes, score lines. So put it in your trimmer. Line up those 2 points. Hold it so it's not going to move, because remember you're cutting through 2 layers of cardstock at the ends, so that's where you might find it handy to cut that out. But like I say, I find it's just easier because I get a nice clean, and I'm just going to give them another little burnish, so I'm happy. Okay, so this one is going over here on the left side, and this one is going on the right side. So we're going to get our glue, and we're going to put it on the tab, 1/2 inch tab, just like we've been doing all along. And we are going to adhere. Let's get my little white piece of paper. I am going to adhere this pocket to the inside left flap. And make sure if any glue escapes, and give it a good burnish. Okay, and now we're going to do exactly the same thing, but we're over here on the right side. And again, I'm going to add my glue. And I'm going to line my pocket corner up with the corner of the page. Lay down my flap, making sure it's at the bottom and at the side. And when I'm happy, and I just want to get my very expensive crafting tool and just tuck it down inside to make sure I don't have any glue, and I don't. So we want to move on now and round our corners on these 2 flaps. Don't drop the trimmer. And I'm only going to round the top of each one of these flaps. You could round the bottom too if you would like that look. But remember, you'd be cutting through your angle pockets. Okay, so let's put the top of my glue before I forget. So we have some mats that are going in these pockets. We have 2 that are 4 1/4 by 6 1/4, and we have 2 that are 3 1/4 by 4 1/4. And I'm going to round the corners. Oops, wrong side. Let's try that again. And I see I need to empty this. Okay. And then we'll round them on the 6 1/4 by 4 1/4. And one of each is going in the pockets on either side. So, and like I said before, this is going to have a ribbon closure. So we're not going to add that yet. So now we are going to move on to the right side back. And the right side back is a pocket. And that pocket measures 6 3/4 by 4 1/2, or 4 1/2 by 6 3/4. So I'm just going to tell you the scores. So on the 4 1/2 inch side, I scored at 1/2. Then I rotated it to the 6 3/4 side, scored at 1/2, and then rotated it again to the other end and scored at 1/2. So we're going to fold on those score lines. So this would be a great folio for, as like I'm making this one with the Jingle All the Way paper. You could do a small baby album with it. You could do a small wedding album with it. You could even make it a brag book. And I'm cutting and mitering all of my corners. So what I did is I mitered the two bottom corners of my flap, and then I mitered the top. And then I'm going to get rid of my bits and pieces. Give it another burnish. Because I always find I like it when my pockets are well burnished, because then they lay flatter when I'm trying to put them into my book. And so now what you want to do is you just want to make sure that you're not going to be going into this gusset, but also that you're not hanging over. So I'm happy there, and I'm happy there. So I'm going to get my glue out, and I'm going to put my adhesive onto my tabs. And one more tab. Okay, and I am going to keep my book in its proper orientation. Get my little white piece of paper to help me here. And I'm just putting it down so it's right on the edge, the raw edge of this page. But making sure I'm not going to be overhanging. And before I have it on, I just want to make sure that everything's going to be happy, and it is. So now I'm going to give it a good burnish. And as I call it, my very expensive crafting tool, I'm just going to make sure that I don't have any glue issues anyplace. And then in this pocket, I'm going to turn the page. In this pocket, I made a booklet. A booklet. Hang on a second. I made a booklet that measures, book out of the way, it measures 7 by 10, and on the 10-inch side I scored at 5. Or with a 10-inch across the top, I scored at 5. So we're going to burnish that score line. And then I'm going to round the corners on my booklet. And you could round the corners on this side, the fold side, if you wanted to. I am choosing not to. And it slides right into that pocket. I made a booklet that measures. The book out of the way. It measures 7 by 10, and on the 10-inch side I scored at 5. Or with a 10-inch across the top, I scored at 5. So we're going to burnish that score line. And then I'm going to round the corners on my booklet. And you could round the corners on this side, the fold side, if you wanted to. I am choosing not to. And it slides right into that pocket. Overhang either side of this flap. So 1/6 and 1/8 by 8 1/2. And we're scoring at 1/2 and 4 1/2. So we're going to mitre these corners. And we're going to need a magnet for this as well. So you're going to do your scoring, you're going to fold it, you're going to burnish, making sure that everything is nice and square, nothing's hanging over, and then we're going to mitre our corners. And we are going to, this 1/2-inch tab is going along the bottom of your top flap. So let's get some adhesive on it. And it's decided it's not. We've been having some very hot days for September where I live, and I'm noticing my glue wants to plug because it's hot. Or because it can. So I'm just going to have that open for right now so I can really see what I'm doing. So I'm centering it side to side, because remember we shaved off just a sliver, or as I call it, a 1/16 of an inch. And we want that down along the bottom edge. Like so. And then for our magnets, I'm going to use a large magnet. No, actually I think I'm going to use 2 small magnets here. Because what I want is I want to make sure that this stays down flat. So I'm going to put a magnet on either side. So I'm going to use 2 small ones. There's one. And I believe here's 2. Here we go. So what I want to do is I am adhering my first magnets to the inside. So this flap is like this. I want to put my magnets here with about a finger width, and maybe not there, maybe there. A little too high for me. I like to always have about a thumb width or a nail width, whatever you want to call it. So we want to do this now. So we want these magnets to adhere and catch, because this is what's going to happen. This is going to be adhered down. So we'll get my little pokey tool, take the backing off of these magnets, and again making sure that you've got enough space here and here so that when you add your pattern paper it's not going to be bubbling up. So we want this laying flat, and we want this to go like so. And so now what you've created is you've created this flap that lifts up and out. So that's the front of the top flap finished. And now we're going to move on and work on the inside of this flap. So the back of that top flap, I didn't do anything to it, but the back of the folio, so the chipboard, I did add a few elements. So I've got a pocket that's going to fit down here at the bottom, and I'll just give you the measurements for that pocket. So that pocket measures 2 by 7 1/8, and I scored on the 2-inch side at 1/2, and then I turned it and I scored on the 7 1/8 side at 1/2, turned it to the other end, and again at 1/2. So let's burnish these score lines. So do remember, if you make this particular folio, I would love to see pictures of it. You could post them to the Scrapbookers of Country Craft Creations. I'll try to remember to put the link in the description below. And you can also post them to my Facebook group, which is All Things Paper by Bonnie. Love to see them there as well. So we've mitered all of our corners, just like we've done on all our other pockets we've created for this folio. And we'll burnish it again so it's nice and flat. I'm going to bring the book back over, lift up the top flap, and where I am putting this is right down here at the bottom of the base of the folio. So I'm putting it right on the chipboard piece, centering it side to side between the flap on the right and the flap on the left. So I'm going to get some adhesive. There we go, and then I'm just going to get my white piece of paper, because like I say, old eyes, and center it between those two fold lines, making sure you're not impeding either gusset, and I'm not. And then I'm going to burnish it. Any glue, use your baby wipe. And I already rounded the corners on these flaps because we're creating a couple of flaps too. So these flaps measure 7 1/4 by 4 1/2, or 4 1/2 by 7 1/4, and I rounded the corners, so you need 2 of those. And then the other thing you need 2 of is you need 2 smaller flaps that I have not rounded the corners on, but I'm going to. And like I say again, that's what I love about these chompers. You can do more than one at a time. And remember, Tammy is now carrying these in the store at Country Craft Creations. And these measure 3 3/4 by 4 1/4, and I created 2 of these. So I'm going to fold on the score lines and burnish. And I'm going to fold on the score line and burnish. And fold on these score lines, which I've already done, and burnish again. Okay. So bring the book back in. And what we're going to do is we are going to center this flap. And what I tried to do is I tried to center it from the top of the pocket and from the top of the flap to the top of the book or folio. So I am, believe it or not, just going to eyeball today. And we don't have to miter these corners because we're not going to see anything. And I'm putting one down on the left-hand side, making sure I'm happy. Making sure it's straight, that would be the other thing that I'd be worried about. Making sure it's not impeding the gusset. And burnish. Once I find my burnishing tool. Get that out of our way. Done pretty good here today. Hardly any clutter on my desk. That's amazing. So the second one that is going to go on the left-hand side, what I'm using to know it's straight is the first flap I put down. And I'm just laying this one on top of it, making sure it's top to bottom. And when I'm happy, I'm just going to pull the tab out, put my adhesive on the tab, and then fold it back under. And I know things have shifted a little bit, but we'll get that fixed in a second, especially when something like this happens. So I'm just going to line everything back up. Hopefully my head's not too much in this picture. And I'm just going to make sure, and I'm happy with that. No, I'm not happy because it's not. There you go, that makes me happier. And make sure it's not impeding, and it's not. So let's burnish this down. Now the two smaller flaps, one is going to go right here on the top of this one, and the other one is going to go on the top of this one. And they are slightly smaller than the flap that I've already created. So you're going to be able to see about 1/8 of an inch at the top and the bottom. And I just kind of like that look of having the paper that's underneath peeking out. So that's what we're going to do now, is put these ones on. If you want them to both be the same size, you can cut them at the same size, but I liked this. So this one is going on this side. Making sure I'm going to be happy. And you don't have to miter these corners because the paper is going to cover it top to bottom. So there's one, and now back over to this side. And again, you're just going to center it top to bottom, and then you're going to add your adhesive. So I am just eyeballing, I'm not measuring. My baby wipe. Okay, and And so you can decide just how you want to do this. You could layer them like that. You can have them this and this. The choice is completely up to you. I am kind of liking this right now. I don't know if that's how it's going to end up when I'm finally finished, but just might. So now you're saying, well, what's going to hold all this down? Well, what's going to hold it down is a booklet. And this booklet is going to measure 7 by 10, and we're scoring at 5. So I'm going to fold it, line up my edges, burnish my score line. I always like to line up my outer edges on booklets and cards and then burnish, because sometimes you can be off a little bit. I'm going to round these corners, same as I rounded them on the other booklet. And then they go in here and they hold down the 2 flaps that we created. And I also have, I believe they are 3 1/4 by 4 1/4. Let's just 3 1/4 by 4 1/4. I have 2 small mats that are also going in that pocket. So there's lots of real estate in this folio for pictures, 3 by 4s, 4 by 6s, and 5 by 7s, if I recall correctly. Okay, so it folds like so, and it folds like so. Remember, this doesn't go down until we put our pattern paper down. And now I want to work on the back inside cover, or the right-hand side inside cover. And we have 2 pieces of cardstock. One measures 4 1/4 by 6 3/4. The second one measures 4 and let's say 5 less a 1/16. So you're just going to back it up just a little bit because it's the same width as the cover, and it's 8 1/2 inches long. So on this one, I scored it 1/2 on the 8 1/2 inch side, and on the smaller flap, I scored on the 6 3/4 inch side at 1/2. We're going to fold on the score lines, burnish, fold on the second score line, and burnish. And we're going to round some corners. So it's always nicer to round your corners before they're in your book. Sometimes you have no choice because you forget. I do that often. We also want to mitre the tabs on this larger flap because it's going side to side. Okay. So the larger flap is going at the top of the page. The smaller flap is going to go at the bottom of the cover or page. I guess cover is a better word to use. Okay, so we're going to put the top flap on first. So I'm turning my book upside down on my scoreboard. Going to put my white paper underneath to help me with the issue of seeing. And I'm just going to dry fit it because I want to make sure that I have room to fold where nothing's going to impede that folding of the book. And I feel happy with that. So I'm putting on my adhesive. And like I say, I do a lot of dry fitting because I would rather find out before I have it laying down that I have an issue and have to then pull things apart. And I have pulled things apart, and it's, yeah, it's a good time. So wipe up the glue if there's any. Burnish. Burnish. Making sure you're not over. Good. And then I'm just seeing that I'm slightly over at the bottom. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to work it up here. I take my big, kind of just adjust that score line just a little bit. These things happen, and it's paper. You can do this. There we go. Much happier now. So this second flap is going down here at the bottom, and I'm just sort of centering it side to side. And if I'm happy, I'm going to put some adhesive. You don't need to mitre this tab on this smaller one. And if I'm happy, there we go. Burnish. We're going to need a magnet to keep this all closed. I believe it's going to go like this. That's the way I like it. So I'm going to use 2 large magnets. And I just want to see, okay, so what I was checking for, where do I have other magnets? And you see right away it attracted because here there's a magnet. So what I want to do is I want to make sure that over here I am using the opposite side. So I am going to be putting this magnet here so they repel from each other. So just going to put 1 magnet and about a thumb down, give or take, just so my paper is going to cover, so I have great coverage. And then I'm going to lift this flap up because the other magnet is going right on the chipboard. And I'm going to use some adhesive to hold my magnets in place. Like so, and like so, down and up and closed. So what we've created here today is our folio. Opens and opens. On the right hand side there are these flaps that lift up and down. Then we have that angle pocket, the overlapping angle pocket on the left side front with these photo mats in the front pocket. Then we turn the page and we're going to have a waterfall that is portrait style, not landscape style. There isn't enough room to do a landscape, but you could if you cut it down. But this one is portrait, so I am not adhering my waterfall until I have my pattern paper on, and since I haven't quite decided that yet, that's what this paper clip is all about. Then there's going to be a ribbon closure here, and we use a magnet to keep all this closed. It opens to the left and to the right, and there are mats in each of those angled pockets that we created. Then this opens to the right, and there is a pocket with a booklet. And then we have our top flap that has a, I'm going to refer to this as my zigzag. It folds out, hopefully. Let me push the book up, or the folio up, so you can see it all. So it's just attached at the bottom of the flap, and then zigzag fold. Then this lifts up. There's lots of room for a nice big picture here. And then on the back inside cover we have a pocket with 2 small photo mats and a photo booklet. And then we have this flip, 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 and flip element. And that's the inside of the back cover. Yeah, I really like it like that. And then it closes up. And these small mats. So that's why we didn't need a magnet on this, and you don't need a magnet here because you've got enough weight that's holding it down. So that is our folio. I hope you've enjoyed making it with me. Look forward to seeing what you have made. And I'm going to go and decorate this and then put that up on my YouTube channel and then load this video on my YouTube channel. Hope you like it. Would love if you could subscribe to my channel. Thank you very much. Hope you have a great day.